On behalf of Ricoh, the Netherlands, a warm welcome to everybody here from Imagine 2012 in Den Bosch in the Netherlands. With at my table, Vasco van Roosmalen. Vasco, a warm welcome to you. Well, warm, it's not that warm here in the Netherlands. Probably you're used to a better temperature than that.
Yeah, a little bit, definitely.
Were you on stage already, or do you still have to go on stage?
No, I'm on in a little bit.
You're on
after
a little
lunch.
bit. Okay, so that's good that you're still fresh to go. Can you tell me the story about Almir Suroi in a couple of sentences?
Well, that's hard. He's an Indian chief of a tribe in the Amazon, in the Brazilian Amazon. There are about 1,300 of them, and they have had contact with the outside world for 42 years. They made contact with the outside world in 1969.
And before that?
Before that, they lived as nomadic, uncontacted tribe in the Amazon. And that was the time that the Brazilian government was putting in a road into that region to occupy the Amazon and develop it.
That was like straight through the village, right?
Yeah, and it went straight through, and it happened to actually go straight through where they were living. And
so one day they heard noises and they thought, what's happening here?
Well, that's the interesting thing. I talked to Almir's father, who passed away last year, and he was 44 at the time of first contact. And once somebody asked him, what was it like when you were living those 44 years before you had contact? And he said, well, we lived a bit in anxiety and fear because we knew something was happening. And we had heard from neighboring tribes that other people were coming.
Yeah.
And that our shamans told us that when this would come, great disease and great troubles and great challenges would be brought to us.
Those stories were already going around.
And so they knew this was happening. So when the first road engineers came in after they'd put in the telegraph lines and they were building the road, the Sioux first took up their bows and arrows. And they ended up doing several battles with these engineers and killing a few and coming out of the forest and stealing their tools and everything else. But these engineers and these people kept coming.
Yeah.
They kept coming.
And they had different materials than bows and arrows.
Yes, and eventually the leadership of the Sioux tribe sat down. They said, look, we can't win this with bows and arrows. We can't win this, and we're going to have to come out and communicate with them. Mm-hmm. The Brazilian government at the time had the Indian Indian Protection Service, who would go out and contact these tribes and ensure they were pacified as these Amazon highways were being built. And so, as we're going to show in a short video called Bows and Arrows to Laptops, there's original footage of the government officials putting up mirrors and machetes, hanging them in the forest, in the Sioux, coming out of the forest and taking these machetes and then making that contact. That was on the 7th of September 1969.
1969, so not 38, 69.
69.
Still.
Yes.
And let's maybe if the camera can zoom in a little bit on this picture, what do we see?
But this is an image from Google Earth, and that's actually one of the really interesting things, is when you go on Google Earth and you look at the satellite imagery of Brazil and the Amazon, you see large parts in the south which has been deforested, and you see these patches of green.
Yeah, exactly. And really patches, like it's straight lines.
Straight lines, and most of those are indigenous areas. Those are traditional lands of indigenous peoples who've been demarcated.
You call it indigenous areas. Are they also then the owners of the land?
They have exclusive use rights. That the Brazilian Constitution gives them exclusive use rights to these lands. They are not the owners. The owners continues to be the Brazilian government and the Brazilian society. Yeah. But the Constitution gives them exclusive use rights and above any other use rights that any other claims. Mm. And that's a very, very powerful tool. And over 20% of the Brazilian Amazon has been demarcated for indigenous territories. That's over 100 million hectares. That's 25 times the size of Holland almost. You're talking, so it's a huge area. It's about 13% of the Brazilian national territory. So imagine, about 300,000 people, which is the indigenous populations of the Amazon, have control or use rights to 13% of this country, which has 200 million people in it. So it's a very interesting. The Constitution gives them this right, but to maintain that right to use that land and to use it the way they want to. Yeah. When they don't have enough of a voting bloc to elect anyone above a mayor post, for example, which is very hard. So how do you do that? How do you work with the society? And even when a lot of that society sees you as obstacles to development. Brazil is developing very rapidly. It has great laws on the books and legislation on environment, on indigenous affairs, but at the same time it clashes with this need for energy, this need for access to natural resources that every country has.
So what did Chief Almir do?
He started communicating, and that's what he did. I mean, He was the first of his tribe who got a scholarship and went to the university.
Yeah.
And then he was called back by his tribe to become chief at 17. His grandfather had been a great chief of his tribe, and they'd recognized this in him. And so he came back, and at the time, these roads, these Amazon roads, are built in several stages. So this is first a small road, and then it gets expanded, but it's still dirt road. And so it allows for certain types of development and not others. Yeah. And in that time, they were paving the road with a big World Bank loan. And the World Bank loan required the Honduran government, the state government, to do compensation programs and to ensure the protection of the indigenous peoples. But that wasn't happening on the ground. Yeah. So the Sului organized themselves, and they called Chief Omir back at 17 for him to help them communicate that this paving of this road would bring new disease. And after first contact, they were, at the time first contact, they were about 5,000 people. A couple of years later, they went down to 290 people because of disease, principally, and the effects of first contact. And they lost most of their traditional land. In 1982, they were able to
Is it that vulnerable that as soon as outside forces come
and that's to this day. There are about 40 uncontacted tribes in the Amazon still today.
How many?
40, at least 40.
And how big are those tribes then?
Anywhere from family groups to
a couple hundred?
Up to 100.
Okay.
Perhaps.
So there are still
uncontacted tribes today. They know there's an outside world. We know that. They know that there are other forces out there, but they've chosen to remain uncontacted.
Lucky them.
So it depends on how you are. Actually, near the Sului territory.
Well, if you're looking around in the world, and sometimes I think like, wow.
But they're surrounded by this deforestation.
Yeah, because all the white areas that you see, that's all
deforested. So what the Brazilian government does, and they actually have a very good program of that. When they identify an area where there are uncontacted tribes, they completely shut it off, and they don't allow anybody to come in.
Okay.
But you can imagine the Amazon is a huge area, and the resources are limited. So, for example, there's a team of 10 Funai officials who are protecting, for example, the last 2 brothers of one tribe. These are the last 2 survivors of a tribe who were eliminated by farmers. That the tribe was crossing a creek, and they ended up, most of them being killed. These are the last 2 brothers who live in that area. And that's an area that farmers and others really want to get into. And what stands between them are these 2 last brothers of this tribe and the government team that's there to protect them. And so they're very much... So Chief Omir works with that as well. So you're dealing with all these different types of groups. You have groups that have had contact for a very long time, but live in very isolated regions that we work with, or people like the Sului who have their territory, who have contact for about 40 years or so, but the deforestation is right up to the limits of their territory. And one of the realities that they face is that for every tree that disappears on the outside of that territory, the trees that are left in their territory become worth more. So we're working towards increasing pressure as opposed to decreasing pressure. As good as the laws are in the book, the economic pressures become ever more. As natural resources become more scarce outside, those who have maintained and managed their resources like indigenous peoples have, and those are still remaining, they become worth more, so the pressure increases, whether it's through co-option, offering them money to have access to those resources, or even just by force.
How does modern technology, because it's the whole story of his tribe and what he did is connected to new technology like Google. Explain how that works.
Well, they see this technology really as a way to communicate with the world. So it's much more than going on Google and seeing their own territory. They know about their own territory. But using a platform like Google Earth with 400 million users and using that to communicate that story, the image that you just showed, as to why that area is still green. What have they done that's right? And how does that area contribute to all of us? And we know now that it does.
What do you say to all those modern commercial business people that say, hey, dear Vasco, we are developing the world, so it's all nice and those couple of trees, but hey, guys, we have to move forward. So.
Well, that's exactly what the argument in Brazil is, and that's what Chief Omir has always had to deal with, is the idea, people say a beautiful forest is a forest that's been cut down and there are cows and soybeans on there, and that's development. But now we know, for example, we face global challenges like climate change, and we know the role that forests play in mitigating climate change. And so, for example, the Sului have a carbon red project, and it's the first project of its type in Brazil, whether it's indigenous or not indigenous, and it's the first indigenous project of its type in the world, where they are getting credits for maintaining their forest, and then taking that to the open market to get compensated for that, and to get resources to continue to maintain that forest. We know that And that's what Chief Omi has always said. He says a living forest is worth more to us as humans and our human society, for our well-being and even for our economy, than its individual extractable parts.
So in
We
fact,
just have to make that argument well.
yeah. So in fact, indigenous people are the most forefront people. It's what we all want to be, because it's the big trend now that everybody has to be green, and we drive electric cars, and we try to save the world. And in fact, that's their way of life, right? That's what they always did.
Yeah, because they live so very close to the forest, and that's
Yeah.
what they do through their traditional ways.
And,
But at the same time, they are also assailed because they have contact with the outside world. They like good clothes. They want some of many of the benefits that our society provides. So how do you provide that balance?
Are you happy with the worldwide trend now? Like, you know, that everything has to be green. That we have that there's some kind of there's conscious awareness around the world that things have
although
to change.
we have to do a lot between creating awareness.
There's a skeptical smile on your face when I say that.
Well, we have to do a lot between awareness and action
Exactly.
on the ground.
So
I
nice,
mean,
no smooth talk, but actions.
It's nice when we trade in our gasoline vehicle for a hybrid vehicle, but there's still a lot of natural resources that went into making that new vehicle.
Exactly.
So that offsets so every time we buy a new car, we still are providing a tremendous impact on the world. And if you look at where all these materials like rare earths and others come from, they have tremendous impact. And when you're on the ground with people like this, you see that there's still this huge demand for natural resources. And for when we're here and we're in a green environment, what we say is a green environment, we don't see the impact of our use of stuff. And that has to be better. It's not that we have to stop consuming, and that's not what anybody advocates.
What do we have to do then?
We have to be smarter about it, and we have to provide real rational choices, and not just trading one thing for another impact that is just as bad. And so we can look, for example, if we talk about biofuels, ethanol. Well, ethanol is made by food crops, right? From food crops. So by not using oil but now using food crops, and all the energy that goes into that, and substituting food and making food more expensive, we're creating a huge impact. So are we really making things better? Maybe not.
To conclude, why do you do this? Why do you do this? Who's Vasco doing this? Why don't you do something else?
Well, for one thing, it's work that I like. I mean, it's my profession. Because you get to do. You get to be this bridge between these very ancient cultures who are facing extraordinary challenges, but have also extraordinary things to contribute to you personally, and you get to help them work with the rest of the world in creating bridges and create that communication. So to be there with a team from Google in an Indian village, after you've been with an Indian chief at Google headquarters in Mountain View, for example.
That's kind of
it's just
cool.
very interesting to be part of that and to look for solutions, because in the end, that's what we have to do. We have to try to find solutions for our society, because we are not working for the environment. The environment always is there. We're working for our environment.
Exactly.
And we're working for the maintenance of our society. And I like our society. I like the benefits it brings to our people.
I wish you all the success and the luck with your activities. I hope this small video will help you a little bit. Thank you very much for this interview.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for watching here from Imagine 2012 on behalf of Ricoh. Bye.